Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Tanvi Taneja. A reminder of the headlines we're tracking at this hour. IMF revises India's GDP growth forecast upwards to 6.6% from 6.4% for 2025-26 fiscal. Despite Trump's tariff pressure, it is the highest figure in developing economies. US government shutdown enters its third week as Senate rejects Republican funding bill for the eighth time. US Fed chair flags concern about sharp slowdown in job creation. 608 trucks to enter Gaza today with key Rafah crossing set to reopen. Bodies of 4 more Israeli hostages returned by Hamas. And tested by Russia, NATO looks to strengthen its defences. Secretary General Mark Rutte says the alliance and the EU are working together on a drone wall to protect Europe. So the International Monetary Fund in its latest report revised India's GDP growth forecast for 2025-26 fiscal upwards to 6.6% from 6.4% in its previous economic outlook. The October outlook increased India's growth projections by 20 basis points, reflecting a strong first quarter carryover. The IMF has highlighted that India has recorded the strongest upside surprise among all emerging market and developing economies. And we have with us now Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, Senior Economic Journalist from India. Welcome, Shubhamoy, to DD India News Hour. First, your opening words on the IMF raising its GDP growth forecast for India for this fiscal. What does it say about the state of the Indian economy?
You know what? It is not very surprising because if you have to juxtapose this against what the RBI is seeing. The data center which we should be looking most closely at is the Reserve Bank of India. While the IMF is a global, global analyst, it looks at all the world's economies, but its data is never as sophisticated as the data which the Reserve Bank of India has about the Indian economy naturally. Because of this, I put more emphasis on the Reserve Bank's projections. And the fact that the Reserve Bank has projected the Indian economy to be 7% is exactly what one expects, and that is where one would be looking at. So if you look at it, that now it's saying the IMF World Economic Outlook released on Tuesday says the Indian economy growth will be 6.6%. I would still say that that is still a lower than what the RBI projection is. And I would think that in the coming months, these numbers will be revised even upwards.
Okay. US tariffs were expected to hit the Indian economy and indeed the global economy. That has not happened so far. Could you shed some light on that?
You see, the US tariffs impact will be seen at the end of the year in terms of the actual realized tariff. Right now, there is far more of noise about the tariffs rather than the impact of the tariffs. So those are good for making optics. In fact, President Trump had used it basically to create an optical pressure. But the Indian economy, how it will respond, what will be the final numbers will come through only after several months when we get to see how our exports are doing. For instance, our exports to USA, like it has come down from the higher level, but it's still positive for the latest reported data, which has been released today. So, in fact, it's about 7% growth rate. So what does it show? It shows that the tariff impact is more something which is there in the news rather than on the impact on the ground. The data is also showing that these numbers are not, the tariff numbers are something which are there, as I said, as a bargaining tool, as a chip for in the context of the India-US trade negotiations. But they will not be so significant as to actually hurt India very substantially. Yes.
Okay. What do you think of the specific initiatives taken by the Indian government to protect the Indian economy from the tariffs imposed by the US?
Which is what you've seen, that the Indian government, in fact, I quote the finance minister said that we need to see data about what is going to happen. The government is thoroughly cognizant of what is happening in terms of the trade numbers, in terms of other data that's coming along. But as of now, the India government is right in saying that there's no cause for alarm immediately. We'll have to see how the different sectors pan out. Yes, there will be some sectors on which, sure, there'll be a bit more disproportionate impact. But as the growth numbers are clearly showing, that the impact on the growth rate, impact on overall across the economy is not as substantial as it was being feared. And that is bearing out what the government's point of view is.
Okay, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva has also praised India's economic and structural modifications. Would you like to add to the steps taken by the Indian government in recent years that have boosted economic growth and made the Indian economy more resilient?
Largely, those are the points. That largely what has happened is that we are getting the benefit of the steps taken in the past several years. What are these steps? One of the first steps that has been taken is the raising of the capital expenditure. The Indian capital expenditure now, as the percentage of the GDP of the government's budget, of the total GDP, has gone upward above 3%. In terms of the government spending, this is now well above 25% of the government spending. Now, these are substantial numbers, and that has been happening over several years, which is what is impacting in a positive way, the government's growth, the growth rate of the economy. Now, if somebody says, then what about the GST, the revision in the GST? Well, my point is that the GST benefit will now start showing in the numbers ahead. So that's why I'm saying that the RBI's projection, which takes into account what will be the impact of the GST through the year, is more robust compared to what the IMF has said. And we shall get to see that over the succeeding months.
Okay, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva also said that India has become essential to worldwide economic expansion. A word on that amazing development.
No, we are not a small economy now. So we shouldn't be looking at these statements as something that's, like surprises us. We are the world's fourth largest economy. Obviously, what India will do, the steps it will take will be very substantial compared to what the world is happening. So these are nothing to be amazed at, that why is IMF saying so. IMF is just recognizing the fact that India is such a big economy. And the fact that India is a big economy is something that in Doordarshan News and several times we have talked about. It's above 4 trillion, going on to expect to be something like 7 trillion by 2028. Now, these are numbers which obviously mean that they have a very strong bearing on the rest of the world. And as you can see, the decisions by the cabinet about new projects and others which have been taken on, for instance, the 65,000 crore rupee support that is being given for shipbuilding. So those will have very strong impact on global trade, finance, and every sort of thing. So that's expected. And this is a very big economy. So obviously its imprint on the government, on the world, will be very substantial, no doubt about it.
Okay, India is now growing significantly faster even than China. Your comments on that?
India has now got on to a growth rate which you will see getting better and better over the years. We should not be comparing our growth rate with other countries, because it is expected that India will be not only remain as the strongest growing economy, but is also the strongest growing major economy. Small economy growing at the rate of 6% or 7% has a very limited impact on the global growth rate. But this, as I said, is a very large economy. It has, therefore, the ability to impact not only its own economy, but also everybody with whom it trades with, which is why you see that the UK has signed an FTA deal with us. The EU is pushing for signing the FTA deal, and it's quite possible that India and USA will also have an FTA, that is a free trade agreement deal soon. Why is this happening? Because it's something which is, it's not, India should not be looked at as waiting for presence or praise from the global society. It is on its own, it is such a very, very major piece of the world economy, which actually will be deciding on which way the world progresses.
Okay, yes. On that note, we thank you, Shubhamoy, for being with us and sharing your analysis on the subject of India's growth trajectory.